start with part 2, I have a big caveat that I want to throw at the top of this glossary, and that is that the way you describe and the words you use is something that people in the immigration debate are very, very concerned about. And they are fighting about it. And that you can say a lot about just the way you describe and talk about categories. So if you go to pro-immigrant groups, you will see something that I believe in, which are statements like no human being is illegal. And yet you'll go to organizations and groups like FAIR, which is like for the Federal American for Immigration Reform, something immigration reform. And they literally have a list of terms that are like, don't say non-documented, say illegal American. Don't say ICE raid, say immigration enforcement and improvement. And then the opposite is true on pro-immigration groups, where they are very aware that the way you talk and describe these groups and that sort of stuff is very particular. So I just wanted you all to be aware of that. And as we go through sort of these groups and these descriptions and that sort of stuff, and we've had a couple of them. We've had a couple of questions where people have asked me, and I kind of paused, because I know that there are groups that are like chain migration. Oh, it kind of depends on who's saying it. That can be, ooh, and like the question about moms coming over here and having, there's a bunch of literature that says like that's a myth and it's a really racist one and that sort of stuff. So be very careful, think about the words, and then even if you take nothing else, be very aware of where information is coming from, because there are some groups that are anti-immigration for statistical and economic reasons, and then there are just some really racist white nationalist groups that are also anti-immigration. And so this topic is incredibly sensitive. And one of the things we talked about as a staff at the Emory debate team, because we do this, is picking arguments that are acceptable and aren't there. And so as I go through this, I just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention, and you know. So the first is United States federal government. You all saw that. I'm going to define some groups, but that's the organization, the country, the government we all work with. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's their legal restrictions on immigration. The big organization that is in the literature all right now is ICE, ICE, the Immigration Control and Enforcement. I don't even know. It's just ICE. It's a group. It used to be the INS. They rechanged the name. They do all sorts of border stuff. Restrictions are the legal laws in place that make it difficult or impossible to do something. The third category is legal immigration. We have a great topicality file. Write down what topicality is. Hayes Watson did it, and some of you are going to work a lot with Hayes. He has a definition from Perez and 10 in the file. It says, the Department of Homeland Security defines legal immigration as, quote, all people who were granted lawful permanent residence, granted asylee status, refugee status, or admitted as non-immigrants for a temporary stay. Or non-immigrants and for a temporary stay. So this is confusing, but the phrase legal immigration in its definition includes non-immigrants, but people who are here for a stay to work temporarily or invest temporarily. So they don't want to. Non-immigrant means it's a category that can't become citizens. Number 4, visa. I've used that a lot. A visa goes to a foreign citizen who wants to live permanently in the United States. It is step 1 to becoming a resident. They fall into categories. The 3 big ones that I want you to know about are F visas, and there's like F1, F2, F3, but F visas are for students, people who want to study in the United States. B visas are for visitors, H visas are for workers. A visa is not permission to come in the country. You still have to pass border. So it's not like you just flash a visa and you're like, hey, what's up? I'm here. Visa is one part in a step. You also have to have a passport from your own country. You also have to pass criminal background checks and that sort of stuff. You also have to get through the border with ID. The actual decision to get in the country is made by CBP. You can write that down. A Customs and Border Protection Office. They will put a stamp on your visa or passport, and that starts the days for all of these visas that are like 2 year or 9 month or 3 month. The day the CBP officer puts a stamp on it, that's the beginning of your visa. For what it's worth, that stamp and record is called an I-94. There you go. I-94. Which to me just sounds like a road. Foreign born, I think that's pretty simple, but it's a person with no citizenship at birth, with no U.S. citizenship at birth. It's another phrase that's common to talk about this population, but it includes naturalized citizens, lawful permanent residents, and all of the other categories. So those statistics at the beginning that I gave, those are all for foreign-born statistics. Green card, another phrase you'll hear. It's a permit to live and work permanently in the United States. It's not citizenship, but it's basically permission to apply for citizenship. And there's steps. Here are the steps for your green card. 1, someone must file a petition for you. Or if you're in the lottery system, you're applying for yourself. 2, once you're approved and there's one available for your visa, etc., you can then file for a green card application. Step 3, you do the background check. Fingerprinting, signature, photo, biometrics, criminal record, where are you from, questions, stories. You have a one-on-one interview, and then you get a green card. Green card says you can permanently live here, work here. You can apply. Next step for citizenship. Yes, ma'am?
You know how long that process takes?
No, because it changes with each administration. And one of the things that you'll read about is that during the Trump administration, it's taking a little bit longer. I don't know why. Paperwork's just not coming through as quick. Yes, ma'am?
Is there a time constraint on green cards? Like, do you have to renew it?
No, permanent.
Okay.
You get a green card, you can live and work here permanently, but you don't have full citizen rights, so you can't vote.
Okay.
You probably can't get Social Security. There's some few things that you would want that are benefits of citizenship.
You're allowed to get Social Security.
You are? Okay. There you go. Green card recipients, so that makes sense, they pay for it. Remittance. Oh, this is one of my favorite words. You'll see it all of the time. A remittance is money sent home or back to the country where the person is originally from, or home to family. It's called remittance. It's a giant portion of a lot of economies around the world. A remittance would be if I went and worked in Spain for a year and sent my paycheck home to my wife and daughters, that would be remittance. See it all the time. It's a large motivation for a lot of temporary workers who will come to the United States. They'll work. Why are they working? Because they're interested in remittances. They can make more money here. We've got brain drain. It's another common phrase. A brain drain is a word to describe the U.S. policy of letting in smart people. So like, you know what, if you're a doctor, remember I identified that in the 90s? The United States was like, you know what, if you're a doctor, you can come here. But then what happens is if all the doctors come here, then there are no doctors there. And that's bad. Doctors work best when they're evenly spread out. But it doesn't have to just be doctors. It could be engineers, it could be mathematicians, it could be any of the high-skilled workers leaving a country and coming to the United States. Competitiveness. Competitiveness comes from the root of competition. When countries are competing with one another, being ahead means having competitiveness. The United States is the greatest nation in the world, and our economy is flourishing, and everyone who wants to be a billionaire comes to America. If those statements are true, then we are highly competitive. And you'll see it all of the time. We're losing. We got a bad deal. China's catching up with us. Canada's becoming more attractive. That doesn't mean Canada's, wearing its makeup well. That means that the Canadian economy is becoming more of an economically attractive destination for immigrants. This is referenced by economists as well as political scientists as being something that's super important for our country's standing in the world. Innovation, to innovate. It's another big argument in favor of immigrants are often said to innovate, but it's any technology, it's moving forward. You'll hear that word a lot. Creating patents and trademarks and inventing new things like the iPhone or the Teslas or this new plant thing that grows really big bananas. Wages. Wages are the amount of money you make to work, often per hour, but also by salary. Federal minimum wage is $7.25. It's important to understand sort of wages, and also you can, in parentheses, put supply and demand. Basically, companies have to pay you to do work. And if you're one worker for 5 jobs, you can kind of demand more money, right? And your wage is going up. You're like, I'm the only person in here who can do this job. 5 companies want it. Y'all are going to have to pay me a whole bunch of money. If there are 5 jobs and there are 500 people can do it, how much is the company going to pay me? A lot less. So wages. Job creator is another phrase that you'll create. You'll see a lot of times in economic statistics that immigrants are job creators. That they, for every one H-1B visa, 5 new jobs are invented. Or immigrants are very, a job creator, job multiplier. Just sort of like, oh, I'm an immigrant. I came here and I'm opening up a barber shop. Okay, because I've opened up that barber shop, 5 other barbers get jobs. That's what that's talking about and referencing. Wrote terrorism up there. That is a major concern with the border security. It'll be popular on this debate because debate is silly and ridiculous, and we like to talk about the silly, ridiculous things. But it's also in the news. I referenced all of the post 9/11 security measures that went into legal immigration and the background checks and the biometrics. All of that stuff is happening because we don't want to let, bad people into the country. And that gets tied into terrorism a lot. Amnesty, in this context, refers back to the asylees. People getting asylum, they're asking for amnesty. They're asking to not be punished for something. You get amnesty in a criminal trial. Do you agree to snitch or plea bargain? You know, hey, if you give me amnesty for all my crimes, I'll tell you about my boss. He does all the really bad stuff. That Lee guy is evil. Migrant. A migrant is a word for a person who moves or who leaves his or her country of origin to live elsewhere. That's it. To be honest, it's just the suffix of immigrant. Some people like to say it. And then they like to say migrant worker, which is the same thing, only instead of seeking residence, what are they seeking? A job. Another big one is trafficking. Trafficking refers to the process of illegally moving a migrant or substance, you can also traffic things, across a border. Traffickers are people who profit from moving people or things from one location to another illegally. Anytime you see a prefix, so drug trafficking, child trafficking, just refers to the category or the substance that's being moved. Organ traffickers, what would that be?
People who move organs across borders.
Yeah, or like internal organs, not like piano organs. Yeah. Expedited removal. This refers back to that long acronym 1996. It authorized the INS, now the ICE, to remove persons without referring them to a judge. Any alien with no entry document. This does not apply to those who claim legal status or if they claim asylum. So, if someone stops you and says, think you're in this country legally, you should claim legal status. You should say, I'm a U.S. citizen, I choose not to do this. Expedited removal was the law that said, you know what, they don't need a judge, we don't need to get the courts involved, we're just going to do this real quick, take care of it. The Department of Homeland Security, the branch of the U.S. government charged with securing the homeland. The definition of what they do is that they will do 5 things. 1, prevent terrorism and manage risks of terrorism. 2, secure and manage the border. 3, enforce and administer immigration laws. 4, safeguard cyberspace. And 5, ensure resilience to disasters. They got a lot on their plate. You will hear them in this context because of the securing the borders, but enforcing and managing the immigration laws. E-Verify. This is interesting in that E-Verify is the phone version. Remember earlier I said you had to prove via a phone bank that the person you're hiring is a U.S. citizen. Now it's e-verify, you do it electronically, you don't have to call in the number, and a person has to have their code or whatever. There's a website if you're hiring someone, and they have to be e-verified. It's an internet-based system that compares information from an employer's forms to the DHS's to confirm that that person can be hired. Remuneration, and it's a weird word. Remuneration. Remuneration is anything of value given in exchange for labor or services. It's a common phrase in there because it includes food and lodging, not just wages. So you'll see it in the workers say, well, what was their remuneration? Because if you hire a foreign worker but provide them with a place to live, you can pay them less because you've given them remuneration that is greater than just a standard paycheck. And the last thing I want to make sure you understand is this per country limit thing that exists. The per country limit is the maximum number of visas that can be issued to citizens of any country in a fiscal year. Someone had asked me like what they were in that group when we talked about it. Well, the limits are calculated each year. And so they start with the total number they decide are available. No more than 7%, the total number can go to one country. No more than 2% may be issued to more than one employer, more than one dependent. It's like if Google's like, we want to hire all of them. It's like, all right, Google, you can't get more than 2% of all the visas this year. But it doesn't create a floor, just a cap. So a floor is, it doesn't mean everyone gets a certain percentage, it just means that you can't get more than that. Most countries do not reach their levels, don't get visas. Other words that you wrote down or questions you have about anything on this list? Yes, ma'am.
I didn't catch the last one for Homeland.
The Department of Homeland Security. That ensures resilience to disasters. So FEMA is another organization that you've heard of, Federal Emergency Management Association, probably. They now have to work with the Department of Homeland Security so that if a disaster happens in the form of a natural disaster or a terrorist-related disaster, the Department of Homeland Security makes sure that we're prepared. Yes, ma'am, in the corner.
Referring back to the separated families, does this only happen across the border, or is it also, could it also be a law that may assume there are families with parents that are illegal immigrants but with children that are U.S. citizens? Is there like still chance of those families being separated and parents being sent to jail or back to their country and children going to foster homes?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, ma'am, right.
So for the immediate relative category,
Okay.
are people who are in that category, they're issued visas, correct?
Yes.
So since it's an unlimited category, what happens to people who like are trying to get into that category, but the percent of visas from their certain country has already been filled?
That doesn't count. So the visa limits count for, I didn't say it out loud, but employment, lottery admission, and the family-based extension visas.
Okay, so
For immediate relatives and refugees, they don't count.
There's no, okay, awesome, thank you.
Yes.
So what were the first and third purposes of the Department of Homeland Security?
According to them, preventing terrorism, securing the border you got, enforcing and administering the land immigration laws of the United States. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sorry to have bored you. These are good notes. And honestly, it's just making sure that you understand immigration. So when your lab leader is like, hey, let's talk about wages, you have some basic knowledge. I encourage you to keep this glossary. Hopefully you have it on paper. Continue to fill it in. Ask questions about what these words mean. Learn to Google. That'll answer stuff better and more thoroughly than I have. Right now is 10:45. Don't get up yet. I have one announcement from Mr. Plater, and then I have another announcement as well.
Neil, there are some of